And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook. It is Wednesday, May 8th, and this outlook is for Thursday and Friday. And we start out this Wednesday afternoon with the sea ice that's through the northern half of the Bering Sea and along areas of the southwest and west coast. Now, there are a number of areas of ice that have opened. These polynyas have seen some ice redevelopment as we've had a little shot of colder air come down from the north. There's been a little potent polar low that crossed St. Paul and St. George last night and this morning, and it's going to cross the Alaska Peninsula and up into the western Gulf as we go through Thursday into Friday morning. But in the wake of it, some colder air has allowed for some late season ice to regrow. Still have pretty decent, though, shore-fast ice along areas of the Yukon Delta. But aside from that, it's just going to be a slow process because temperatures along the west coast are going to average below normal here for at least the next couple of weeks. The pattern is not really going to change a whole lot. The pattern has become more progressive with weather systems coming out of the North Pacific, either crossing into the lower Bering or coming up into the Gulf, and this pattern will continue through mid-month, which will bring precipitation tend to average above normal southern parts of the state into the Panhandle. And then as that moisture creeps northward into the central eastern interior, it's also going to help precipitation there average above normal. A little stronger low with some more forceful winds, gale force winds with maybe a few gusts to near 50 knots as this low lifts up just west of Yakutat Bay between there and Cape Suckling. And we're going to see some heavier rainfall on Thursday across the Panhandle, along with some gusty winds as that low comes northward and pulls this front up through the southern parts of the Panhandle. Meanwhile, just lingering troughs of low pressure in the interior will keep scattered areas of rain and or snow mixed continuing. And as this low lifts further north, they'll just kind of reinforce some more moisture into the interior for Friday as well. Low pressure crossing the Aleutians on Thursday will continue eastward. Here's that remnants of the polar low. And by Friday, what was left of the polar low feature is already kind of pushed up here through this region. Meanwhile, what's left of the old low has come north, and there's just kind of this trough and lingering moisture, especially north of the Alaska Range. And then this system will work its way northeastward into the western Gulf by the early weekend, with a weak ridging up into the southern half of the Panhandle for Friday afternoon. So looking at the marine forecast, most of the notable wind action on Thursday will be across the Panhandle. Look at these winds: southeast 25 knots, waves 4 or 5 feet, Dixon Entrance, Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Gusts to 45 knots, Stevens Passage, and up through Lynn Canal with waves as high as 5-6 feet. Outer coast with the front pushing in. Strongest gale force winds will be south and then east there, south of Sitka, off of Sitka, and outside of Gustavus, Cape Spencer. This area here could be some wind shear, low-level wind shear along the front as it works its way inland. And then during the day Friday, winds do come down. We expect south winds to 15 knots, the middle and upper Lynn Canal channels here. 15 knots with waves a few feet. Northwest winds to 10 knots around Ketchikan and Metlakatla with 2-foot waves. The outer coast winds will generally have a westerly component, 15 to 20 knots, swells 7 to 8 feet. Along areas of the northwestern Gulf, Thursday variable winds 10 knots. Off the Kenai coast within Prince William Sound, waves only a couple feet Prince William Sound. And then southerly winds there up toward the entrance of Cook Inlet at 15 knots with 3-4 foot waves. Friday will feature some stronger winds. We're looking at easterly winds 20 knots within Prince William Sound and Upper Cook Inlet. But they'll be southeast 25 to 30 knots outside of Hinchinbrook entrance with swells up to 7 feet. And then as we get down here toward the entrance of Cook Inlet and off the Kenai, look for easterly winds to 30 knots with swells 8 to 10 feet. Winds on Thursday will be easterly Shelikof Strait, southerly on the east side of Kodiak Island. And there's no kind of this bit of a circulation associated with the remnants of that polar low. In the wake of it, winds turn more west-northwest, around 20 to 25 knots across the lower end of the peninsula. Waves running right around 5 to 7 feet for the North Pacific side, 3 to 5, but as high as 9 feet there north of Cold Bay. And then on Friday, the other low, finally, the one that will be crossing the Aleutians on Thursday, finally makes it up here in the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula. So ahead of it, east-southeast winds 25 knots across Kodiak Island, as strong as 30-knot southeast winds east of Chiknik there, and then across Bristol Bay, 30-knot easterly winds. And then as we get down further southwestward, we expect southerly winds 15 to 20 knots. And again, swells could be as high as 9 to 11 feet, especially on North Pacific side. For the Aleutians Thursday, that low will be trucking across into the central Aleutians. Ahead of it, look for south winds 30, 35 knots, becoming more southwest to westerly to 40 knots there, especially west of Adak and around Kiska. Swells could build as high as 15 to 20 feet across the western Aleutians. And then on Friday, as that low tracks across the tip there of the Alaska Peninsula, look for northwest to north winds, eastern Aleutians into the central Aleutians at about 25 to 30 knots, falling off and going back toward the east-northeast 20 to 25 knots west of Adak. For the southwest coast, winds on Thursday, northeasterly 20 knots out of Bristol Bay, northwesterly within Kuskokwim Bay, easterly the Pribilof Islands to 25 knots, swells 4 to 5 feet there. North winds down through Norton Sound and along the outer coast of the lower Yukon Delta, trying to turn westward there near Hooper Bay, but 10-15 knots. And where there's opening in the ice, there could be some undulations of a couple of feet. And then on Friday, strongest winds easterly out of Bristol Bay, 30 knots, 4-foot waves. North winds around the Pribilofs to 30 knots with 10-foot waves. And then winds as we go up along the Yukon coast. Northeasterly is 25 knots out of Kuskokwim Bay and out of Hooper Bay, but then turning southerly there on the south side here of Norton Sound at 10 knots. And through the Bering Strait, Thursday we're looking at north winds right around 15, 20 knots. 20-knot winds, northerly winds through the lower Chukchi Sea, northeasterly winds off of Point Lay on up to Utqiagvik, and then they fall somewhat variable around 5 knots there, central eastern Arctic coast. For Friday, look for westerly winds 15 to 20 knots from around Dead Horse through Kaktovik with ice in place, variable winds around 5 knots there, Utqiagvik, but generally offshore. And coming down through the lower Chukchi Sea, kind of a mixed bag of winds, generally though north-northwest 15 knots. And then as we pass through the Bering Strait, look for northerly 15-knot winds that extend on down toward the north side of St. Lawrence Island around Savunga.